Wow, Snowwalker, you really know how to find the weirdos on YouTube. After watching Snowwalker's recent video, I'll link to it below, and I'm posting this as a response to it. I checked out the channel for this so-called Jessica Mystic, and it's just about the most ludicrous fucking thing I've ever seen. But it illustrates a point that I'd like to make. I taught philosophy at Oklahoma State University for 3 years, and when I taught introductory courses, on day one of introductory philosophy, I would begin not by talking about what philosophy is, but by talking about what it isn't. And one of the examples I always used of what is definitely not philosophical is what I called the mystical guru model. To give an example, in the 1750s, a philosopher named David Hume wrote a book called Discourses on Natural Religion, in which he attacked what is today called the intelligent design argument. And the argument that he was going after went basically like this. Everything in the universe fits together very well, and if the universe were just a little different, it would all fall apart and we'd all die and blah 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 blah. So obviously, the universe must have been designed by some sort of, all-powerful master craftsman who designed the universe. And Hume responded by saying, well, let's imagine you have an utterly stupid, incompetent craftsman who just keeps putting the universe together, and then it falls apart, and then he just blindly puts it together again and it falls apart, and then just keeps doing this over and over and over until eventually, just by coincidence, he gets a combination of parts that actually hold together and work. And Hume points out, well, the end result of this would be exactly the same. It would look just like the designed universe, but it wouldn't be designed. And so he says, well, we can't conclude the existence of a designer from the fact that the universe appears to hold together well, or appears to work. And Daniel Dennett, in his book, Darwin's Dangerous Idea, pointed out that he has kind of presaged Darwin's idea of natural selection with this argument, without realizing it, of course. And apparently Darwin wasn't familiar with Hume's argument either. But the point I want to make is that this argument, and the reasoning in it, is the same regardless of who's saying it. If you haven't read Hume, you can still get his argument, say, from me. Or you could get it from a different version of it from Darwin, or you could get it from Dennett, or you could get it from lots of different people. It doesn't matter who's making the argument. What matters is the reasoning behind the argument. Does the reasoning work? And this is just how good philosophy works. It's about the reasoning in the arguments. And also this is how good science works. It's about the evidence. It doesn't matter who the scientist is. What matters is whether there's evidence that we can all share together, and does that evidence support the theory. So, you have lots of modern biologists who have never read Darwin, and probably never will read Darwin, but who understand the theory of evolution better than Darwin did. And that's because it's not about Darwin. I'm not trying to diss Darwin here. He was a great writer and a great scientist, but you could be a perfectly good scientist while knowing nothing about Darwin. This is not the case with the mystical guru model. The mystical guru speaks in cryptic language that no one but the guru apparently understands. And if you want to gain the knowledge, you have to go to the guru, because it's all about the guru. So, you get those images of the person climbing the mountain to see the guru, because if you want this mystical knowledge, it's all about the person whose little brain contains the knowledge. It's not a social thing. It's not something we can all share together, like philosophical reasoning or scientific evidence. I think mysticism is an extremely selfish and arrogant thing. And, I extend that also to religion and to supernaturalism in general. It's all based on whatever's going on in here, and knowledge is not something that we can all work together and build together. Instead, it's something that's contained in somebody's little mind, and they're special, whether they're a prophet or a god or a minister or, a mystic or whatever. They're special, and they have this special knowledge, and if you're blessed by them, they will grant you this knowledge. And so, we turn to Jessica Mystic's page and look at her About Me. And let me tell you, for her, it's all about me. In many ways, I am like a ghost. I live on this planet, but I am not of it. I belong to no one and everyone. Blah, 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 blah. I am not a writer, and nor am I a mystic, despite the fact that she calls herself Jessica Mystic. I simply am that I am, quoting Yahweh. I am all that is and all that will ever be. Light, dark, good, bad, no difference. It is all the same to me. All lead to the divine sooner or later. Apparently, being omnipotent doesn't give you the ability to spell. So if we're talking about gaining knowledge here, or gaining understanding, the mystical, supernatural, religious standpoint is diametrically opposed to what I'll call a philosophical or scientific standpoint. From one perspective, it's all about what's going on in some particular person's mind, and they'll bless you by sharing it with you. From the other perspective, it's a social thing. There are certain things, reasoning, evidence, that we can all come together and share. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who's making the argument. What matters is the strength of the argument if we're talking about philosophy, or the strength of the evidence if we're talking about science. And what really bugs me about this, what really bugs me about this is that the mystical religious view will always claim to be the transcendent one. But it's not transcending shit. The most basic philosophical starting point is your own subjective experience. That's where we all have to start, because that's the only starting point we have. The point of reasoning and logic and evidence and science and philosophy is to try to get past that. It's to try to find something that we can all share together, and knowledge that we can all build together. It's an attempt to transcend these very things. If you ask me, the truly transcendent philosophical position is atheistic naturalism. That's the one that really tries to get past the most basic human perspective, which is your own subjective internal perspective. But these mystics, while simultaneously being incredibly shallow and incredibly just, trapped within their own minds, will also simultaneously claim to be the one that's more deep and more profound and more transcendent. It's ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. And you can see this in the mystics by their utter ignorance of anything that isn't going on inside their own little heads. You did not beat 50 million sperm for nothing. You won that race. Apparently being a mystic means you don't have to use punctuation. Anyone who knows a thing about biology knows that sperm are not racing each other. They don't have minds. They're just basically a cell containing a deactivated haploid genome and a flagellum. And they basically just move around randomly. But they all contain half of the genome of the male that produced them. So if any one of them reaches the egg, they all win for all intents and purposes. And in some species, not in humans, but in some species, you have specialized sperm, which aren't supposed to reach the egg at all. I think it's in some species of Drosophila, you have attack sperm that destroy the sperm of other males, and you have sperm that clot up and produce a seminal plug, which prevents other males from inseminating the female. Now, these sperm didn't win the race, but the point is not for a sperm to win the race. It's not even really a living thing in and of itself. It's just an epigenetic extension of the male's anatomy used to convey this haploid genome to match it up with the haploid genome of the egg. And you can get this from taking a biology course or reading a biology book. And you don't even have to be a biologist to know this. I'm not a biologist. I study philosophy. But you can figure this stuff out. If you care about what's going on outside of your own little mind, and if you're willing to learn socially and based on things that we can all share, rather than just making shit up and insisting that you're the source of knowledge. So, anyways, to conclude this rant, don't be fooled by fake profundity. Anyone can string together profound-sounding language that's really, really cryptic, and you have to come to them because they're so special, and they'll tell you, they'll interpret for you, they'll give you the hermeneutics, and tell you what the knowledge locked up in this cryptic saying is, what the metaphor is, or any of that kind of shit. Real knowledge should be something that we can all share together. It should be something that doesn't matter who's saying it. What I said about sperm, if it's true, would be true regardless of whether I'm saying it or not. And maybe it's false. I don't know. Scientific theories can be disproven, so maybe I'm wrong. But whether I'm right or wrong has nothing to do with me. It has to do with whether or not the physical evidence matches up with what I'm saying. Science works that way. Philosophy works that way in the sense that what matters is whether the reasoning works. It doesn't matter who's saying it. What matters is whether the argument works. Mysticism doesn't work that way. Religion doesn't work that way. Supernaturalism doesn't work that way. Supernaturalism and mysticism and religion are all just about whether or not you're special. And, fuck you, you're not special.